Hello everybody and welcome to this month's Contract Administration Practice Group. With that, I want to hand it over to Douglas and Jim to get going with today's presentation and start learning about the project closeout. Douglas and Jim, off to you.
Welcome everybody to Project Closeout. I am coming to you today from a wood and metal shop, so please let Matthew know in the chat box if there's too much background noise, and we'll try to do something about that. I apologize for that, but maybe this will be fun. So we want to talk about project closeout and the end of the process, so to speak. Perhaps maybe one of the most wonderful days for you in the project, or perhaps not. It seems that often this part we have not planned well as practitioners, and it just sort of happens. And so we want to go through some ideas of how to thoughtfully manage your time and your project through the closeout phase. So Matthew, let's go to the first slide. According to the practice guide, construction contract administration culminates at this point in project closeout, and it involves activities that create an orderly transfer of the project from the contractor to the owner. I love this drawing because often it's like pulling teeth to get from one set of hands to the other, and I think it's a very appropriate diagram. But let's go to the next slide and talk about who the participants are at this point in the project. And I should have said we're following along in Chapter 12 of the practice guide. So starting with the participants that are involved in the closeout phase, we have multiple parties who have varying roles as we close out. The manufacturers, suppliers are of course involved in inspecting the work and being able to issue warranties, to provide warranties, and to provide owners operations and maintenance data as it's needed for the owner to hang on to the facility long term and operate it. For the contractor and the subcontractor, of course, they've installed the equipment or materials. They have inspected during the process of the installation those various materials, and they have started systems and made sure that the pieces and parts operate in the way that they should, in the way that they were specified. As far as the architects, engineers, the design team, we too have inspected the work as it went into place. We have gone through and done an inspection of that work to create punch lists as items needed to be punched, and done our final reviews to be sure that the work is in accordance with our plans and specifications. There are also commissioning authorities that now currently frequently are involved with our projects, and we'll talk a little further about whether it's total project commissioning or specific commissioning, but they have been involved or become involved at this point to assure proper operation of equipment, and they complete their work during the closeout phase of the project. And then finally, the owner or facility manager accept the project from the contractor, making their final payments, and then occupying the facility and taking over the long-term operation. So these are the individuals that are involved or become involved or change their involvement at this point in the project. Doug, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would like to make a observation or suggestion. When you get to this point in the project and you're getting all of these closeout documents, a lot of times many of the subcontractors have completed their tasks long before you get to this point, and they've moved on to the next job. And it's oftentimes difficult for the contractor to get them to go back and put together the O&M manuals, the warranties, or documentation that they might need from a sub that has long left the job site. So one tip, I guess, would be to try to get some of that stuff earlier on in the process while that sub is still on the job, while the contractor can still get his attention, and have him get that stuff into you so you can review it and get it back to the contractor. You may tell the contractor after you've reviewed it and given him his comments that he needs to get it corrected and hold it and give it to you all at one time at the end, so you're looking at all of it together. But it might be helpful to look at some of that stuff earlier on in the process and wait until the closeout. I know one thing with warranties I always do is require them to submit warranties with the submittal process. And I check the warranties to make sure that if I say I want a manufacturer's 5-year warranty on something instead of a standard 1-year warranty that you get typically, that the warranty indicates that. And if it doesn't, then I mark that up and send it back with the submittal, so that when they provide that warranty at the end of the job, it's correct and we're not going through that process, which could further stretch out this closeout process. So if they know up front, I'm asked for a 5-year warranty, I want a 5-year warranty, don't submit me a 1-year warranty at the end of the job, it can kind of help that process speed up a little bit.
That's right, good point. Well, Matthew, let's go to the next slide. So the related documents that we frequently use and refer to, starting with the AIA documents A201, which are the general conditions of the contract for construction, sort of lay out what the, well, not sort of, but they lay out what the process, the procedure is for closeout at the end of the job. The general contractor, of course, makes an initial inspection and punch list of the project. He then notifies the architect or engineer that he is substantially complete, and then the architect or engineer, once they are notified of substantial completion through their inspection, and supplement the general contractor's punch list with additional items that they may see, he or she may see, and give that back to the contractor. The contractor then completes that list and lets the architect and or engineer know that they are in fact complete with correcting those items. The architect or engineer then inspects and verifies that that list is complete, and at that point is able to process final payment recommendations to the owner, and then the owner makes final payment to the contractor. And that's just a general outline of how the process is established in the AIA documents. Matthew, if we go to the next slide, the outline is fairly similar within the EJ/CDC documents, but it varies just a little bit. And this is the C700 standard general conditions of the construction contract. First, the project is inspected and a punch list is done by the general contractor, which is a tentative punch list. They then notify the engineer that the project is substantially complete. The engineer inspects the project and then adds tentative items of theirs to the general contractor's punch list. And at this time, the engineer is able to establish a tentative substantial completion certificate, which here is where it varies from the AIA documents. Then the owner approves the tentative substantial completion certificate, and the engineer creates then from that tentative a definite substantial completion certificate and attaches any list of items that at that point are still incomplete. This goes to the contractor for their use and follow-up and correction of items. Once the work is complete, and the general contractor notifies the engineer that they are complete, and the engineer then inspects and verifies that that work is completed and is able to make a recommendation to the owner for final payment that the owner then provides to the contractor to close the project out. So those two documents that outline closeout are very similar, but just slightly different. Let's go, Doug, any items to add to either of those documents?
No, those are pretty much outline the process. The one thing that is not mentioned in those that everybody just needs to make sure, because we're going to talk about them later, you keep in mind is the other closeout documents that are required, the record drawings, record specs, release of liens, all those other closeout documents that are required. All of those are not listed there, and we'll be talking about those a little bit later.
Right. Well, Matthew, let's go to the next slide then as we take a walk through the closeout piece by piece. First, we'll talk about the starting of systems and equipment. This, of course, is the work of the contractors and subcontractors. They are responsible for the coordination between the required subs to have the equipment field verified as it needs to be for the issuance of warranties, to have the startup happen as the manufacturer's requirements stipulate, and also to arrange for observation by the architect, engineer, owner, and or those factory representatives that are necessary to see startup of equipment occur.
A lot of times the commissioning agent will also want to be a part of that startup process, and so you need to remind your contractor of that so that he coordinates with the commissioning agent as well.
That's right, and there may be testing type services that for some pieces of equipment would also need to be there. And moving on to the next item, project record documents. Of course, a critical piece of the closeout. Some of these have been coming in throughout the project, like the submittals, the shop drawings, product data. Some are drawings that have been changed or modified, perhaps, as construction continues. So they are marked up in the field. The specifications are a part of this. They too perhaps have been marked up or modified through the submission of alternative products that have been reviewed appropriately. Perhaps in some projects prior to the bid date, and other projects perhaps during the construction phase. The addenda that have been issued, any photos that have been taken, the various logs that have been kept throughout the project, whether they are testing logs or whether they're logs, simply administrative logs for the submission of documents. Any reports or certifications that are required as a part of the general conditions for the contract, as well as contract changes, directives, or any field-related pieces of information that have been issued by the architect, engineer, or owner. Doug, you want to add to to that?
It seems as though getting these record documents and record drawings always is a little bump in the road during this closeout process. I don't know when was the last time that I received a set of record drawings, as-built markup drawings from the contractor that I did not have to send back at least once. My tip to try to alleviate some of that is to, on a regular basis, I typically try to do it on a monthly basis at the monthly OAC meetings, is look through the contractor's record drawings, make sure he keeps them on site, thumb through them after the meeting, before the meeting, make sure that he is marking those things up as the project is moving along, and make sure that he's got all his subs marking them up in that same set. I've gotten sets at the end of a job where the plumbing is not marked up. Well, where's the plumbing? Well, the plumbing contractor, he took them with him and he lost them. I can't get them back. Or, you know, there's a whole host of issues that can come up. But if they've got one set that they are maintaining in that project trailer, and you put your eyes on a monthly basis and make sure they're updating it, then it might help that process go through a little smoother at the end.
Matthew, I apologize. I haven't been asking if there were any questions or hands raised, and I should have been doing that.
At this point, there haven't been any questions, so you're good to go at this point.
Okay, great. You know, Doug just spoke about the record drawings, and I've seen several architects actually put in perhaps their supplementary general conditions that there would be a review of those field set of drawings for each primary contractor at the same time that the pay applications are being reviewed, either in draft form or pencil form, so that it was directly tied to the processing of their next application for payment, that those documents be up to date. And that might be a way to support their being done on a more timely basis if it's spelled out ahead of time. So let's go to the next slide and talk about the operations and maintenance manuals. The next piece of the closeout puzzle. Of course, this is data that's been collected and assembled for the owner to be able to operate the systems within the facility, systems that become seemingly more complex every year that goes by as we get smarter and smarter buildings. These are typically spelled out in each section of these operations and maintenance manual pieces are typically spelled out in Part 1, the general of the specification sections in each section. They are typically organized according to master format for the owner's use and to tie with our contract documents that have been issued for the project. Typically, they are prepared by the contractor and may have some influence from commissioning agents depending on how the project has been set up and what kind of commissioning is to be done with the project. I think one of the notes that's really critical here that I often see not happen. These are documents that should be prepared and reviewed and ready for use that are used in the training process that the owner's personnel go through, whether it's demonstrations of how the equipment operates or whether it's actually hands-on training. These documents should be there for the owner to make notes with, to make their own comments, in the margins, so that they, as they go through that process, have these documents to refer back to. Any kind of software that's included, that needs to be included for the operations of the facility, should be installed and there should be copies, if that's appropriate, in the O&M manuals as backup for reinstallation should that be required. And then also in these documents there should be listed the attic stock that has been inventoried and included in the project. I'll just take a sidebar note here real quick on that attic stock. Please talk to your customer, talk to your client about attic stock and what they actually want and what they specifically do not want. We often as practitioners have attic stock included in our specifications that the owners don't receive as a percentage of carpet, for example, that's been installed, nor do they actually have the facility to maintain it. So just to always try to throw that out there to be sure that when you have attic stock in your specifications, it's tailored to your specific customer and client.
I would add on to that, talk with them about the O&M manuals as well. Make sure that you're giving them what they want in a format that they can use it. They may not want it in CSI master format, for example. They may not want 5 hard copies. I had a job recently where we had to inspect 5 hard copies and they wanted 1 PDF copy. So just as you're talking to your clients, attic stock is a good one. O&M manuals, just make sure you're putting in the documents what it is that they want and what they're going to use at the end of the job.
And as BIM takes over the marketplace, you know, the O&M, the manual and operations portion of what we do is changing and could be dramatically different in the near future. I've seen presentations where in hospital projects the pharmacy stocking and reordering of materials is actually tied through the BIM model down to the drawer that contains the aspirin. And in the end of the project, the owner would undertake inventory control with the building model that they were provided by the designer. So O&M processes are changing now dramatically, and as Doug said, they're being tailored to your specific customer and what their needs are as far as the project closeout will be critical. Matthew, let's go to the next slide and talk a little more about systems and training.
Okay, before we move on, Jim, we do have a few questions and some comments from the audience here. Larry was first added on here just to, a reminder to make sure that attic stock will not deteriorate or become unusable during storage. So I think that's a good thing also to remember and to talk about in that meeting. But then 2 questions, one from Larry here asking, have either of you had any experience with GCs keeping electronic record drawings?
I can't say that I have in the true sense of them doing them electronically. I have received record drawings from the contractors where they had marked up and then scanned and gave me PDFs of the record drawings, but not ones where they've actually made the changes electronically.
No, I haven't either, Larry. I haven't had that experience either.
All right, and then second question here comes from
They
Jim.
marked up whether...
You first, Douglas.
I'm sorry, Matthew. I was going to say, getting PDFs of the marked up record drawings to me was no different than getting a hard copy. In fact, I found I liked it better. Saving paper, not as much space, it's easier to work with. So I was okay with getting the marked up drawings that were scanned in PDF format.
All right, and then we have the second question here from Jim. He's asking, is it a legal option to have the as-built updates and the other submittals tie into monthly payments to the contractors?
You are free to contract pretty much at will, provided that you're not trying to contract for something that is illegal. So tying payment to making sure that the record drawings are being maintained is allowable. Tying payment to submittals is allowable. That one might be a little bit tougher. You might need to make sure you've got a good submittal schedule with some firm dates, or tied it into the pay app with a cost loaded schedule type situation. But yes, you can make payments, those periodic monthly payments, conditioned on some other events happening.
And I think I've had experience that has been, I guess the key is that it's clearly spelled out in your general conditions or your supplementary general conditions as a requirement. I've had clients who, for example, tied their schedule and milestones, particular phase dates, in a similar fashion. And actually some that have required manpower-loaded, cost-loaded schedules, and then use those in review of the applications for payment if the project was perhaps not on schedule.
One client, I think this was kind of taking it to the extreme, one client I work with, not only did the contractor had to submit a separate letter that certified that they had maintained the record documents for that month, the architect also had to sign a certification that he reviewed those record documents before he could sign that certification for payment for that month. So this owner wanted to make sure not only was the contractor doing it, that he wanted to make sure the architect was checking to make sure that the contractor had done it.
Right.
And all of that was by contract.
And going on that, that's actually interesting. We had Angel had posted a question here. What's the architect's role in this review and training? So I guess kind of going off of what you just mentioned, Douglas, you know, within where we are talking right now with the OEM, the O&M, I'm sorry, where is the architect's role in this, or is it really more at this point in the contractors and the owner's hands?
In the situation that I was just describing, the owner put it in our contract that we had to check and make sure that the contractor was maintaining the record drawings. So we were contractually obligated to review those drawings before we signed off on the pay app each month to make sure they were being maintained. Now, what that means to me, or in this situation, was if I knew that the contractor had to shift the storm sewer line over 3 feet because it conflicted with a duct bank, I needed to look at his record drawings to see that he marked that up on those record drawings. If I didn't do that, if he hadn't done that, I needed to point it out to him and get him to do that before I'd sign off on that pay app. Does that make sense? If not, we'd welcome a follow-up question.
It does, and I think the majority of the responsibility does lie between the owner and the contractor in this part of the process is training, unless, as Doug has described, it's specifically explained or tied back in a different fashion. Maybe perhaps more involvement from the engineer or some of the systems for a better understanding of description of specifically how a system was expected to operate. They may have more involvement during this phase, but I think typically it's between the contractor and the owner.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, Jim, I would agree with that. Because a lot of times we're not out there every day, and so we don't know all of the minor adjustments that are made, and you're relying on the contractor to mark those on a drawing so that at the end of the job the owner gets a set that shows what's there as opposed to what should have been there. But if you are looking at that along the way, instead of waiting till the end, it's going to be fresher in your mind. Oh yeah, we made a change here, he needs to get that marked on there, than waiting at the end of the job and trying to remember 6 months, 12 months back, did something change that he didn't mark up?
That's right. Well, Matthew, let's go to the next slide because it's still talking about this same issue.
Sure. We have a few more comments into questions, so just know that Larry, Drusilla, Michelle, and Stephen, I see your comments and questions. I'm going to hold them off to the next couple of slides and then insert them there. So next slide here for you, Jim.
Sure. And we can take those questions. This is just a little further delving into the demonstration of systems and training. Certainly, it's critical, for the owner to understand how to operate the facility. This is a phase of the closeout process that is coordinated by the contractor, who's responsible for scheduling and being sure that the attendees that need to be there are actually there, and that as we talked about the O&M manuals, having the tools there, the syllabus, if you will, for what this process is about, but also having the documentation in place for future reference. I've been associated with projects where the training sessions were videoed, and have heard from the owners that it was really very beneficial because they were able to sit down and through their own time, on their own time, go back and verify that things were what they thought. They were very good refreshers. So whether that's video, voice recordings, photos, some people are a little hesitant about allowing that to be done, but if that can be contracted and worked out early, it is certainly a benefit. But Matthew, you want to ask, go ahead and share the question.
All right. Well, we had a couple of comments that led into a question, I think, the way I'm reading them here. So the first comment here came from Drusilla saying, we get contractor CAD, or CADed, I guess, CAD''D drawings as closeout for fire alarm projects, which are actually their shop drawings and don't show the other electrical information. We require them to mark up the design documents. And then going off of that, Michelle Boom indicated that she's worked with both GCs and subs. In both cases, final payments have been held for record drawings, closeout docs. We've also required submittals prior to first payment being issued. And both of those talking about with drawings and information submitted kind of leads into Stephen's question here saying, have you seen the use of embedded shop or record drawings in Revit drawings and files and seen them accepted by the owner? So I guess kind of going into that with the submission of record drawings and record documents, have you seen any of this being implemented into the updating of information in a BIM model?
I have certainly withheld payment for closeout documents and record drawings. I have not seen in my practice yet the incorporation of them into the Revit model. I could see
Go ahead, Doug.
I could see where that could be of a great benefit to the owner, but I have no project where that's happened yet.
Yeah, I actually myself worked on a project that I have a close personal friend who has done some large water and wastewater work, and they do have BIM models that they have allowed the contractor to update as record drawings, but then they capture that information, verify it themselves before they turn that over to the owner. So I guess maybe they're letting the contractor mark up a copy, a BIM model copy, and then they either accept or reject those changes. But then that BIM model is turned over to the client as a operations platform, if you will, for their facility. So they have actually tied the BIM model to their record drawings, to the owner's operations of the various plants. Matthew, let's go to the next slide if there aren't any other comments about systems training or demonstrations.
Sure. There's two questions here. I guess one of them is more of a question from Larry directly to Douglas with his case study he was talking about. He was wondering, did the architect require his consultants to review the record drawings before reviewing the pay-app? And kind of tying into that with the conversation we've been having, the question comes in here is, what is the difference between record drawings and as-built drawings? Just wanted to clarify that as well for some people that may not be using record drawings as an official term in the past.
In the case where the owner was requiring us to sign off on the record drawings before we signed off on the pay-apps, yes, we were requiring our consultants to do the same. And like I said, we would do it at the monthly OAC meetings where everybody was there, the design team, all the consultants, the owner, and the contractor. We would either do it before or after the meeting, go through the drawings, look to make sure they were being maintained, and our consultants were doing the same thing. Because we also would have our consultants approve their scope of work on the pay-apps. We always do get their approval on pay-apps before we sign off on pay-apps. Jim, I'm going to give my stab at the difference between record drawings and as-built drawings, and then let you chime in.
Let me interrupt you before you do that, Doug. Everybody understands this is free legal advice. No, it's not. This is opinion shared and not legal advice, because this is
right.
a hairy question. This is a hairy question.
This is my personal opinion in the way I try to use the terms. As-built drawings, and I usually put it in quotations, is the term I use for the set of documents that the contractor has in the field that he's marking up to show how he has actually built the work. Record drawings are the set that I give the owner after I've gotten the contractor's as-built drawings, in quotes, and incorporated what he's marked up, including anything that I know of that he may not have marked up with RFIs and changes, and incorporated those into a set, and then that set that's given to the owner that's incorporated all that stuff, that's what I call the record drawings. As-built drawings, the phrase kind of implies that it's going to be exactly as it was built, and I don't know that anybody has ever produced a set that's a true as-built set of drawings, so that term can get you into some trouble. Jim?
Sorry, I had it on mute there. I think that your definitions are what I would have said, that they are the same as my opinion, and I agree. The as-built moniker is a dangerous one, and I think it is a bit misleading because we aren't verifying in our contracts typically the exact set of circumstances, and that as-built definition is a much more exact term. Where the record drawings are something that is a record of what has occurred on the job, and to the best of the ability of the people involved. So I think they are different things as Doug defines them there, and clearly carry some legalistic concerns when you're using them in the contract.
And you can always define them in your documents.
There you go.
Go to your supplemental general conditions and say definitions, as-built drawings, and put it in quotes, and this is the set of documents that the contractor's marking up in the job site. And the record drawings, this is the set of documents where we're incorporating the contractor's markups that we turn over to the owner. And if you define them clearly in your documents, that might help you stay out of some issues. I frankly have not been made aware of any major legal issues or cases over the term record drawings versus as-built, but it's better to be safe than sorry.
That's right. Matthew, let's go to the next slide.
Sure. And while that's coming up, Angel was just wondering a little bit additional clarification here is, what is the extent of info included in the as-built or record drawing? Is it the full CD set, or is it, just an appendum of, like 3 pages here and there as changes happen? If you can give some info into that as to what the extent of the info is that's included on those documents, I'm not sure how comfortable you feel answering that as well.
Well, what we ask for is for the contractor to take our construction set and mark in that set any changes that occur during the course of construction. So what I expect to get back is the whole construction set, not just 2 or 3 sheets and him saying that, well, these are the only sheets that changed. I want the whole set back marked up.
Yeah, that's right, and it should include, what I like to see is that it has on it the addenda posted that were there when the job started, the requests for interpretation that have been issued that are there, change order items that have occurred. It should be basically a recording of what we have been through since the beginning of construction, and would include the specifications as well.
Agreed. And in addition to the RFIs and change orders, any minor adjustments that the contractor's made that he maybe didn't issue an RFI or didn't need a change order for, those should be marked on there as well.
There's an interesting comment. There's an interesting comment here from Drusilla indicating that AIA best practices addresses the difference. I'll post the link to it in a second on the chat box for everyone, but it indicates by the contractor, they show in red ink on-site changes to the original construction documents, whereas measured drawings are prepared in the process of measuring a building for future renovation or as historic documentation. They are created from on-site measurements. Record drawings are prepared by the architect and reflect on-site changes the contractor noted in the as-built drawings. They are often compiled as a set of on-site changes made for the owner per the owner-architect contract.
That's consistent with what Jim and I have said.
Yep.
I would just, as we're moving away from record drawings, I would just note that it might, something that we do is when we prepare the record drawings, we put a stamp on there and a disclaimer on there. So we note that these are record drawings, and we note that this is compiled to the best of our information from information supplied by the contractor, and it may not be a true accurate representation of what was actually constructed on site. So most of the consultants that we work with have similar disclaimers. If you don't, you might want to get with your legal counsel or your insurance company and get some advice on whether or not you should be putting disclaimers on your record drawings.
There you go. Well, that leads us into the next piece, commissioning, and we separate those into 2 types. One, total project commissioning, and the other, systems and equipment commissioning. So in total project, this would begin when the project is conceived, and the team member for commissioning is a part of the project through design, through completion, and the putting of the building into service. And so in the practice guide, there actually is a diagram that shows the commissioning process. We didn't put that here on the screen, but you certainly can take a look at it there in the practice guide. And you know, there's more closeout involvement in a total project commissioning project to confirm compliance as you go through the closeout phase of the project. The second type is systems or equipment commissioning, and something that probably I'm more familiar with than total project commissioning. And in this scenario, the commissioning is oriented to specific systems or equipment, particularly HVAC, and in my experience, and it is to assure that the instructions and operational requirements for a particular manufacturer are followed during the process of installation. And there's less closeout involvement to confirm compliance in this sort of commissioning, because that has been actually the specific piece of what the commissioning agent did on that particular system. Doug, anything to add about the commissioning?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay. Matthew, we'll go to the next slide. So in the next slide here, we're now at the project closeout, talking specifically about the time of completion. And we have this broken into two parts. First is substantial, and then in a minute we'll talk about final. I love this cartoon here from the contractor's perspective. You know, yet another punch list off the fax machine from the architect to the contractor. You know, this is the phase of the job where we get to review, as we said earlier, the contractor's punch list. But substantial completion is defined sufficiently, the project is sufficiently complete so that the owner can use it for its intended purpose. We are at the point that the local authority having jurisdiction has looked at the project and has signed off and accepted the project is complete. The proper notifications and the follow-through by the contractor has gone on. We have done our inspection, supplementing the contractor's punch list where they started. There are projects where maybe we determine that the project is not substantially complete, and the contractor goes back to work on correcting punch list items. The punch list may not be sufficiently complete for us to establish substantial completion. There may be more access necessary than to complete the work than we feel comfortable in assigning substantial completion. But again, referring back to the practice guide, there are some forms in this section for punch lists to be used to issue. And finally, the issuance of a certificate of substantial completion, once we do establish that it is sufficiently complete, that we issue or the engineer issues, and those documents are noted there on the screen. Let's go to the next slide and we'll continue substantial completion. This is a point where there is a change of responsibility for the liability of the project, insurance, security, utilities, the operation of the facility, the payment of bills for power, water, things like that. and there may be more than one substantial completion date on a project. If you have a phased job or one that is completed in stages, we typically try not to have varying completion dates just for warranty, ease of warranty, and ease of long-term operation by the owner. But sometimes it's not avoidable. Substantial completion can be, it's not always, but it is typically when the warranty begin on roofs or other parts of the project, equipment, manufacturers' warranties for the equipment. This is a point where the owner may have been holding off undertaking some work that they wanted to do, either because of a particular expertise, perhaps manufacturing equipment, or it may be a point where they undertake the correction of faulty work, or perhaps for lack of performance from the contractor. And it might be a time when that would occur. And this is a point where there's adjustment for retainage potential if things have gone well. I would just say that last note there, this is something of a personal experience. It would seem that this is a really simple definition, substantial completion. The owner can use this building for what it was intended. I have had more debate over what is substantially complete than about any other term on any project. It's just amazing. Because we've talked about a list of things that have to be in place. The local authority having jurisdiction might well find that this facility meets specific code requirements enough to say, yes, you can move in. But it may not be practical or possible for the owner to use the facility for the purpose it was intended without some other things that the inspector really has no concern over. I, for example, had floor finishes be an issue, and the owner couldn't take the property because they couldn't move in and set the furniture about, but the local authority was fine with the bare concrete. And so it just is a point of great disagreement often what is substantially complete. Doug, any additional comments there?
No, we're getting close to time, so let's keep going unless we've got some questions.
Okay. Matthew, you want to go to final completion then? This is when the project is completed by the contractor. The architect or engineer has agreed that yes, in fact, it is complete. The owner has agreed and has made their final payment, and the magic here is that the contractor has accepted that final payment, cashed the check, and closed the books. The last inspection indicates the punch list is completely corrected. Closeout submittals have been received and they're correct. They're all outstanding items that have been involved on the project have been closed out. Final change order has been processed. There are no outstanding issues. If there were, they've been reconciled, whether there were penalties or damages. Anything that was out there hanging out has been taken care of and appropriately processed. And the clocks start on warranties and various things like that for the project. So, we like to call it in our office done. The project isn't just done, but it's done. And, that's when it's final. Let's go to the next slide. One thing that this slide is meant to talk about some opportunities as much as they are steps to go through in project closeout. There's a facility evaluation now that you're finished. Mainly that's something that the owner will do. whether they have facility management or staff of their own. But it's a great opportunity for us as practitioners for more education and client contact and marketing. How is the property working? You know, is it working like it ought to? Are things coming together as we had hoped? And this facility evaluation can be broken into categories by the owner and facility managers to track the productive life of the facility, whether it's the building as a segment, whether it's the users, the processes that they use. But these can be very advantageous to us. And post-occupancy evaluations, whether it's specific products or whether it's systems that we use as a designer, whether we can identify things that work that we should carry further into our planning with this client or other clients, lessons learned, if you will. Perhaps we would identify missed non-conforming work that we didn't see in the punch list phase of the project, nor did the contractors. So this is another opportunity for project closeout and doing an evaluation post-occupancy. And then there's also an extensive form in the practice guide for project feedback, to have a chance to sit and go through with your client what the experience was throughout the project. Now, I've talked too long. I see we're over here. I'll be quiet. Doug, is there anything that you want to add?
Just a couple of things. The one-year warranty is an opportunity to sit down with your client and take advantage of some of these items that Jim just talked about. One tip, so to speak, for helping to get documents in at the end of the job. Everybody knows about liquidated damages and holding money for getting those closeout documents done. And typically, substantial completion is a time when that retainage can be reduced further, or those payments can be released. I have seen some owners, and this might be something you want to talk with your owners about, is not only having a trigger point being substantial completion, but have a different trigger point being final completion, so that maybe there's a different liquidated damage amount, a lesser liquidated damages that's charged for every day past the date that should have been set for final completion. If you got a punch list and you say, okay, you're going to be done in 45 days, if you're not done in 45 days, then liquidated damages at a lesser amount than for substantial completion kicks in. So as a method to try to keep the contractors and subcontractors' intentions to get them out there to get the job done. So that's all I've got. Matthew, as we're wrapping up, any questions or comments from anybody?
There's a few comments here as we go to the last slide. Just one moment here. Two people both indicated some questions here regarding one of the last comments on the slide previously, actually. What determines whether warranties start from the date of substantial completion or final completion? And going on that, Chuck also said, doesn't the clock start ticking at substantial completion versus final completion? So I'll let you talk about that a little bit, as that seems to have been a question.
Standard AIA language is that warranties start at substantial completion. There can be exceptions to that, and they're usually identified in the documents. Also, again, you need to be clear when you're looking at these warranties. When they come in, you'll get a warranty from the manufacturer. I've seen them that say that the warranty starts from the day they shipped it. And if that's the warranty and you get it and accept it and the owner's going by that, then you're setting yourself up for a fight, assuming that something happens 12 months after they shipped it, but less than 12 months after substantial completion. So typically it's a substantial completion, but there can be exceptions to that, and if they are, they're defined by the contract.
That's right. That's what I'd say too, Doug, is if it's at final, then it's something that was in the supplementary general conditions, say, about starting the clock later, and but my experience typically is substantial completion.
As Jim and I well know, the state agencies here in North Carolina don't recognize substantial completion, and the warranties start at final completion.
Right.
All right, we have an additional question here. What is your experience for the success of applying liquidated damages?
I'll let you take that first, Doug.
The liquidated damages have been and can successfully be applied. There are some rules that can't be viewed as penalties. In some states, if you have liquidated damages, you also have to have a corresponding incentive clause, so that if you get done early, you get compensated for getting done early, just like if you get done late, you get penalized, or you have to pay for being late, not really penalized. So they are established. The courts recognize them. I've had projects where we have assessed them and have not had a big issue enforcing them. I have some owners that will put them in there with no intention of enforcing them. In fact, on a project here that we're working on currently, the contractor was about 2 to 3 months late on this project, and we went to the owner and says, okay, we need to start holding per the contract, your contract. It says when they're late, withhold payment for anticipated liquidated damages, and the owner says don't even mention liquidated damages, and they were in his contract. So it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the owner, but they are recognized and enforceable.
I think the thing I would add is that it is critical that you have followed your contract and your self-defined general conditions if you are to be successful at assessing liquidated damages. If you've met your milestones and you've turned your documents around, you know, whether it's submittal return or RFI answers or payout processing, if you have met your milestones, you may be in much better shape in having an easier time to resolve liquidated damages versus if you have not done those things, because they all come to bear and are all brought out into the light of day when you start through that process of assessing damages. Any others, Matthew?
Yeah, we have one comment and one question. So the comment here comes from Michelle Boone. As a plumbing contractor, we use this time to submit a service agreement after the initial warranty period is up, or to conform to the manufacturer's recommendations for service. I think that kind of talks a little bit about the warranty and that time period between substantial and completion. So just wanted to put that in there. And then finally, Angel has a good question here, I think maybe reserved for a future conversation. I'm not sure, but it looks like the architect's services are extended at post-construction. Is it fair for the AE to bill the owner for that time?
I think that could be a whole hour seminar right there, webinar. You know, absolutely. It would be my quick one-word answer. It typically, but often isn't, unfortunately, and I think for a variety of reasons. But you know, maybe that is a topic for a further discussion.
Yeah, and I would give my typical attorney response and say it depends. You may be justified in seeking additional services, and you may not, depending on the circumstances. So without getting into details, the next... Go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, if I know we need to wrap up, and if Matthew, if folks send you ideas, you know, I think that is a subject matter of post-doc or you know, follow-up services might be a good topic. But if anybody has topics, please send them to Matthew or to me or to Doug, and we'll get them on the list for our next gathering.
which is scheduled for June 25th, the fourth Tuesday of next month.
All right. Well, I guess with that, I have no additional comments or questions from the audience. So looks like it's a good time to wrap up. Thank you for those that stayed a few minutes late. Sorry again for going past our hour that we promised you. But again, good conversation, good topics, and look forward to seeing you all next month. Thanks, Jim and Douglas, and have a good rest of your day.